And we're back working on the Jose 50 watt head. As always, brought to you by 3 Monkeys Solderless, home of the world's best cables for your pedal boards. 1/4 inch DC, easiest, fastest, cheapest. And we got RCAs too, if you got a home stereo or a car stereo that you need to make work better. So let's continue on. Check us out though. 3monkeysolderless.com. All right, so where we last off, we had the board built. We have the chassis loaded up with our transformers, our sockets, our filter capacitors. And now is where I usually like to start wiring and work towards just building out the amplifier towards the last 2 stages, which would be, I like to do the sockets, do the power section, put on the panels, put in the potentiometers, then I'll put in the board, and then I'll do the shielded wire, build out the little preamp circuit over here for the Jose mod. And that's really all there is to it. So let's just start. I start with the octals usually, and I'm just gonna give these guys a little bend towards one another. I'm gonna put on my resistors here. I use some 1 ohm, 1 watt precision resistors. Reason being, you're looking to, or it makes biasing the amp really easy for people. So basically you can read the current, the cathode current, by putting a meter across your 1 ohm resistor here. And then it's just a matter of moving the decimal place over to get your static dissipation through the cathode in terms of milliamps. And then you can put that over there. And then you can use that number along with your plate voltage number to calculate what the static dissipation of the tube is in watts. And then you can bias the tube that way. So it just makes things easier for people. I mean, if you don't have like a bias meter, that some companies have come up with, or you prefer not to use like the transformer shunt method, sort of checking the current flow across the transformer secondary from center tap out to each leg, which can be a little bit tricky because you need a meter that's capable of handling that kind of voltage and current. And it can be a little bit, let's say, less than safe if you don't know what you're looking at. So this just makes things really easy for people to bias the amplifier by reading the voltage across the resistor itself. Oh, gotta turn on the fan. Here we go. So continuing on. All right, always make a good kind of mechanical connections in addition to your sort of solder connection. All right, so now we have those in place. The next thing I'm going to want to do is I'm going to run, all right, let's say we'll run the secondary of the output transformer. I'm going to grab some of these little guys here, our little wire ties or zip ties. We're going to go all Hannibal Lecter on them. Although I don't think Hannibal used wire ties for any of his evil doings. So this is the choke lead here. So I'm going to basically combine it with this stack, or with this sort of bundle. There we go. A few more of these. So these leads are the secondary of the output transformer, and you have the center tap, which is hooked up to your anode of your rectifier, of your power supply. You need some more of these zip ties. Just need one more there for right now. I'm going to take out a few more and put them in my zip tie jar. There we go. And then the other two legs outside of the center tap are connected to the plates. And I think we've gone over this before, that obviously if there's a phase sort of component to it, and if you hook them up wrong and you have an amplifier with negative feedback, the negative feedback will become positive feedback. And then you'll have an amplifier that is in basically like, you know, a perfect oscillator. And it's not going to work very well. So you want to pay attention to all of this, like which is your center tap, which is your, you know, in phase, and which is your out of phase. So, you know, usually you can find out from your transformer diagram which is which. Like you'll have a dot on it, something like that. All right, so that's ready to go. Now I'm going to put in, where's the end of the orange? It's too many. There we go. And do some screen wiring here. So I'm going to use, cut about that much off there. Reserve that. And I'm going to go and do the screen wiring, because that'll go underneath, kind of. So I'm going to take it and fold it around like so. Take this guy and put it in there too. Fold it around. There we go. We'll see how long we got with this solder. We have some more coming, but this may be the duration of the video when we run out of solder. So we'll see how far we could go. This is like Kramer and I forget who it was. The salesman, the Saab salesman, was it? And they take the car out for a test drive and they're trying to see how far they could go on the gas that's in the tank. So it's a little like that, maybe. All right, and then I'm going to run this lead now over to the filter can. That one was being a little stubborn. Looks good there. Little pinch to where I want the wire strip to begin. There we go. Okay, so this will be the connection to the board. That'll be your connection to your filter cap. This filter cap is going to be for the phase inverter. So let's continue on with the wiring. Next, I'm going to want to put in the screen, or rather, excuse me, grid stoppers. And these are basically current limiters that help the tubes absorb the transients from the phase inverter, and by that I mean the spikes, and it creates well, certain tubes have a tendency to have at the very top of the transient, like the very beginning of a pick attack, without these sort of, you know, stopper resistors, they have a tendency to do a tiny bit of an oscillation, which can be heard as, you know, a less than desirable sound. So these are kind of like suppressors for that phenomenon, if you've ever wondered what they're about. So we wind them over our socket here and crimp it down. I like to make a little pigtail here with my drill bit. Makes a nice little kind of place for the wire to go in. So all this, like the way I build, also has to do with a few things, like layering and what makes things easy in terms of, you know, making sure that what you're doing now doesn't interfere with something you got to do later. So there's a method to the madness. It's not willy-nilly. It's kind of like, you know, why did I put these in right now? It's, well, because I'm going to put this in next. And once this is in place, you really don't have a chance to work on that particular tab of the octal socket. Right, so now is a good time to put in your sort of screen resistors, and these are also current limiters. Marshall actually didn't even use these at a point in time in their sort of career, so to speak. Early on, Marshall just kind of hooked the screen supply directly to the tube element, to the screen, with no limiter on it. And so, you know, tube life, you could argue tube life suffers without these. Some people think that the amplifiers don't need them. I'm of the opinion that it's not a bad idea. That the downside to having a screen resistor current limiter far outweighs, or rather the good side, the upside far outweighs the downside. So you see now, if I had done this first, there's no way I was doing this resistor without it being a pain in the butt. So this is kind of, you know, everything I want to do is sort of in a order that makes my life a little easier. So it's, you know, something I've developed. Developed it pretty early. I've been doing the same sort of build procedure on amplifiers since, you know, for the last 25 plus years. Pretty much came up with the way that I wanted to do things fairly quickly. That made the most amount of sense. And I've been sticking to it ever since. All right, so there's those. Those are ready to go. Okay. Get these little bits out. That's good. All right, so the next thing we can do is we can attach, right, our leads for our transformer here. So we have a black, which is the choke. And we have white and red, which are our plate leads. And we have brown, which is the center tab. So I'm going to bring red, so it's marked on mine. Red goes here. Just gonna give it its crimp. There we go. Always have a good mechanical connection where possible. Right? So that's good right there. Now we can take these guys. Now these two, the white is going to go to the socket, but the brown and the black are going to come over to this fuse holder. So I'm gonna give it one more zip tie here, just to keep it all nice and neat. Like that. Right, and then I'm gonna bring the white over to here. Okay, so that looks good. Now before we do that, out of the way, we're gonna run the ground lead for the filter capacitor. That's for the phase inverter as well as the screen supply over this ground right here. That's where I like to ground those particular nodes. So I'm going to mark it kind of where I want to strip it from right there, and then I'm going to give myself a little bit of lead beyond the place where I'm stripping it. Like there, I think you could really hear the right way to strip a wire, right? You heard the jacket kind of tear away from the cable there. There we go. And that's what you want. You don't really want to ever touch the core wire with your tool, if possible. You just want to kind of get a good grip on it, get some cut, and then give it a yank and let it kind of pull the jacket and tear it free. All right, so we're gonna use our tool here to, there we go. That's nice. And we can lay the plate lead on top. So right about there. Giving it its little pre-bend, right, to help it get it in the socket here. And then I could just kind of, there we go, crimp it on. Solder it down. There we go. So now we're pretty close here. So the next thing I'm going to want to do is I'm just going to kind of poke these guys out of the way through the hole where the fuse holder will be, just to keep everything up and out of the way while I continue on with wiring. All right, so now we're going to do some of the secondary on the power transformer. So we're going to do the filament leads, which are the heaters, which are these three thickest cables. We have a black, a brown, and an orange. And then we also have the center tap for the high volts to deal with. So first I'm going to do the grounds for these, right, for the filament as well as for the high volt. Now the filament lead is the orange, I believe. Well, let me double check on the transformer diagram because I don't want to mess that up. So let's see. So the brown is the center tap. So I'm just going to go ahead, and I'm going to be running cables this way. So to make everything nice and neat, I'm going to kind of get everything up against the wall. And then I'm going to give myself my mark. And then I'm going to go ahead and cut it to length. And then we're going to strip it off. There we go. Go ahead and feed that through like that. Okay, that's good. Then we're going to take the ground from the mains filter cap and get it there too. Right, along with this guy, center tap for the high volts. So I'm going to kind of pay it to there. You know what I actually like to do? I almost went against my build. So I like to bring the center tap to the can, okay? This may seem crazy, but it allows for a single impedance from the filter back to ground. So to me, it makes sense. So what I'm gonna do actually is kind of weird, right? Maybe some people might be like, that's overkill, but I like it. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take the center tap to the can, right? So the can is not grounded yet, right? I'm gonna take the center tap of the can, and then I'm gonna take a lead as well and run that through. There we go. Bring it around and bring the center tap lead around. Crimp it down nice. There we go. Okay. Lay it down into the corner there, and then this lead will lay on top of it and come right to here. So you can see that the center tap is going to the filter capacitor ground, and then the filter capacitor ground is going to the actual ground lug. So that to me creates a single grounding point for that node, right? Which is comprised of the filter capacitor, which will have the rectified. Why is that not getting through there? There we go. Right, so it has the filter of the legs on either side of the center tap of the high volts going to that filter capacitor, and then its ground is right there at the same sort of potential. In my mind, it may be so minor in terms of what the benefit is, but I still think it's technically a better way. You know? You always got to think, like, what is the best way possible to do this? What is the best way possible to do that? And do it that way. And then you end up with something that, you know, you've kind of gained a lot of inches here and there. So that makes things very reliable, very quiet. And I have to say, I do pride myself on having high, you know, gainy amplifiers that aren't noisy in the sense of buzz or hum, right? Those are the things that can be avoided. On a high gain amp, something like hiss, the shh, that's thermal noise, that's shot noise, that's produced by the tubes. There's no getting around that. And as you amplify tube stage to tube stage to tube stage, that shot noise or thermal noise, you know, is amplified. So there's nothing you can do about that shh. What you don't want is the or the bzzz. That you can avoid. That's the whole thing, is to avoid that stuff. All right, so now we can, what was I gonna do next? Well, we can run the filament lines, but I also wanna run some of these high volts as well. Or rather, AC volts. The input voltage for the amp. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna grab the back panel. Said back panel, and I'm going to put it on with a couple of things. All right, so we're going to use a little placeholder here, in a sense, on the end to hold it in place on this end. A little jack, temporary. right, like that. You can run, okay. And then we're going to put in our IEC connector, right, which is for our wall voltage or power cord. Then we can go ahead and get our hardware out, a couple of lock nuts. And a couple of screws. Again, stainless steel, I prefer. Grab our nut driver and screwdriver. And then we can just go ahead and get these going. Give them a start. Get that out of the way. Of course, it came right back. It wants to be over here. All right, then I'm going to get the panel nice and lined up. Make sure everything's where it needs to be. The holes are all in the good places. All right, and then I can go ahead and tighten this down with the nut driver. Now I can double check. That looks great. All right. There we go. All right. So now I can start running. Let me tuck these back out here so they don't keep getting in my face. Okay, there we go. So now we can start running connections from the IEC along the chassis, right? And get this all nice and neat, and then we can run the filament line on top of that around the edge to here. So that's sort of the plan. So let's start with the ground, which this is the most important connection, in my opinion, in the whole amplifier, right? So you have to be very sure that you never damaged this core while you were stripping it. Right, and that you get a very secure connection here. So a good crimp. I knew that was going to fall. And a good solder. Right, there we go. Don't disturb the solder joints while they're cooling, or blow on them either. You want them to cool at room temperature. And then I'm going to fold it back to the chassis. And I'm going to bring it around, right? And I'm going to bring it down this way. And I'm going to bring it over to the other lug. So it has its own little dedicated lug here. Again, this is critical. So make sure that you didn't damage your core wire in any way while you were stripping that wire. And you'll have a nice ground connection for the most important ground there is, which is the main earth, right? This is going to your house ground. There we go. So we'll let that cool for a second. Now we can go ahead and fold it back against the chassis. Again, like that. There we go. All right, so now we can also put in our fuse for our mains. So I'm gonna just go ahead and load the fuse in here. There we go. I'm gonna screw the nut and place it through. There we go. Orientate it correctly. I want it this way, actually. There we go. Because I want this side, or excuse me, no, we're doing the mains fuse. See, I was getting ahead of myself. That would be for the HT fuse, would be orientated the opposite direction. Okay, we're gonna start thread. There we go. I'm gonna grab my wrench and just kind of tighten it. I'm going to grab a screwdriver. Now, this is where you got to use a little bit of feel, because you don't want to strip it, but you want it tight, but not over tighten. So that's good right there. Now we're going to check the fuse holder operation, make sure it's good. Yep, that seems pretty good there. So we can put this stuff aside and we can continue on. All right, so next we're going to run the neutral wire. So I'm going to use some of this blue here as the neutral. So we can fold that down to the bottom of the chassis and bring it around this way. Just flop it out that way. That's good. And we're going to bundle all this with some wire ties in another minute once we get all of our other connections. Now we're going to run our hot lead right from the... Why is it all tangly? Okay. So we're going to run it from the IEC connector to the fuse holder, and then from the fuse holder up to the power switch. So the switches that we're using are obviously double pole, double throw, so you're switching both neutral and hot leads at the same time. And it's a indicator rocker as well. So when you turn it on, the switch lights up. Okay. Now I'm going to run the lead from the other side of the fuse. Right, and fuse holders, you can use either side, right, for either operation. It's input, output, they're both equally good for, there's no, you know, end of the fuse that's better than one side to use as your input versus your output of your fuse. So you can do it however you want. So I prefer to use this one to kind of run, since it's already sort of closer to the chassis, I'm going to use it to run in that direction. So down, right, and out this way. So that's good. And then I can attach the other end of the fuse, or rather of the line that we want fused, to right here. Wait, I don't think I caught that last little bit. There we go. Here we go. All right, so that is pretty close. Now we're also going to need to run our high volt right to the can. So the high volt is going to be coming off of here, but we're going to kind of run it this way. So we don't really have to worry about where that's headed. So we could just start wire tying, not tiring. I am not tired of wiring. I am wire tiring. Now this could be a little bit of a pain in the geschmoggle. Is that a word? It is now. So there we go. Get everything nice where you want it. This is sort of the keystone. Wire tie, if there can be such a thing. Right? It sort of sets the tone for where everything's going to go. Now we could just keep traversing up the bundle. You get my screwdriver. Right, just peel it a little bit away from the chassis so I can get something on. Oh, it didn't go under that last one. There we go. All right, we're gonna get everything settled the way it was. Nice and neat. Get that. There we go. That's nice. Let's see how we're doing on time here. Appears someone has hit me with a message, so I can't quite read the time. Oh well, we'll just keep going. I think we probably got enough time to get to a little further. I'm using the iPhone these days to record everything, which is kind of a pain in a way because you can't use the phone for the hour that you're doing this, and then people are always trying to get in touch with you, and it makes things just not as easy. So maybe I should find a used iPhone that I could just use for recording, so I have Here we go. Nice. Okay. And we can kind of just let these go on up and we can join those all together. But now would be a good time to sort of twist your filament heater leads. This is what's known as the twisted pair, which is the reason why you wind these things together is for noise rejection. So the two legs of the filament line are center tapped, which would make each leg out of phase in a sense with the other, right? So they're producing a 3.4 volt AC signal right down each leg, with each black versus orange out of phase with the other signal, right? So when you twist them together, they have a tendency to reject the noise of the AC wall voltage, right, which would be 60 cycle. So twisting them together helps reduce your possibility of having hum, right? So that's sort of why we twist these together. Not only does it look nice, and then we'll just use like one wire tie here. We don't really want to bind them too close together, but we're just going to sort of keep them in place. here we go. Continuing on. All right, so we have the beginnings of our heater line installed, which is good. So now we can go ahead and get these up in the air. We could actually put in our HT fuse at this point. So I'm going to insert the fuse in here. The old 500 milliamp fuse. There we go. Turn it. All right, so that we have all this going on over here. There we go. Now I'm going to get the wrenching in and just tighten it down a little bit here. That's good. Check the operation of the fuse holder, make sure everything's working good still. And then it's tight enough. Yep, that works. Now we're going to run our can capacitor. Get this sort of out of the way a little bit. And run this through. I think we must be getting close to the time, so we're probably going to do a couple more things today and then call it a video. Okay. Let me just see where we're at. We're at 43. I was able to I had to touch the phone, so hopefully no one got sick when I touched the phone and disturbed its sort of look there. All right, so this is gonna come and join up. It's gotta go straight down. It's gonna come and join up on this side. There we go, of our fuse holder. So we're going to get these all about the same length here. Peel this back a little bit, and then we're going to insert all three of these leads through that fuse holder. Okay. There's always one joker that isn't tinned. It should fit. It always has before. Gotcha. Now we'll crimp them off like that. Then we'll go ahead and solder these guys home. There we go. All right, so on the fused side, go put that there, straighten this back out again. So on the fused side, we have the filter capacitor, the choke, and the center tap. So if there is a disruption on any of those, such as a shorted filter capacitor or a messed up tube or whatever you have there, it will trip the fuse. If your rectifier is shorted out, it will trip the HT. If you have any issues with the filament line, it'll trip the HT. I mean, excuse me, the mains. So, did I say that correctly? I just want to make sure that I said this correctly. So, if you're having an issue with the mains filter capacitor, right, or a tube, or something that is like a short there, or short in the tube, or the choke, it'll trip the HT fuse, right? If you have a problem with the rectifier, the filament lines, the center tap of the high volts, you'll trip the mains fuse. So we're all fused up and ready to go. I'm going to use one more wire tie just to hold the filament lines in check. Not that they are going anywhere, but I just like to bundle it all up together to keep it on the side. Right? Stomach is a little nervous. There we go. There we go. Okay. Okay. Well, 1 or 3. Just want to get these neat. There we go. So that's 2. So they're kind of layered. If you needed to do anything, you don't have to cut them all off. So there we go. So we're in good shape there. Good shape, good shape. Everything's looking pretty good here now. So this is reserved now for the anode of the rectifier. We have these we can kind of put to the side. So all we have to do now is sort of wire up. Well, the next thing to do, I shouldn't say all we have to do. The next thing we're going to do, and we'll do that in the next video, is we'll do the power switches, we'll put in the pots, we'll do the secondary on the output transformer, and I think that will get us along the lines of being ready to start putting the board in. So I think that'll be good for this video. So stick with us while we keep building this, and thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.